I have traveled far and wide across the world, bringing joy to children and families every Christmas Eve. But every now and then, a memory returns to me so quietly, so gently, that it feels as if the stars themselves decide to whisper it back into my heart. This is one such memory. It is the story of a shepherd, a small village, a winter night filled with wonder, and a lesson that has stayed with me longer than even the oldest Christmas traditions. So gather close and listen well, for this is one of my favorite tales to share when the snow settles softly and the world grows still. Long ago, in a land where winter winds swept across open fields and hills rolled like frozen waves, there lived a humble shepherd named Elias. He was not remarkable in wealth or status, nor did he chase glory or praise. Elias spent his days tending to a small flock of sheep that were as loyal to him as he was to them. His clothes were worn, his boots patched many times over, and his hands were calloused from years of guiding his flock through the seasons. Yet his spirit was steady, peaceful, and kind. That, my friends, made him richer than most kings. Elias lived in a simple stone cottage at the edge of his village. Each morning, he would rise before the sunlight kissed the snow, gather his staff, whistle to his faithful old dog Rowan, and lead the flock to the hills, where they could graze even through winter's breath. The villagers admired Elias for his gentleness, though they wondered why he chose a life so quiet. They would say he could do more, earn more, live more grandly. But Elias would only smile. He knew the truth. He was exactly where he belonged. One year, winter arrived early and harsher than usual. Snow piled against windows and turned paths into silver rivers of cold. Food grew scarce, and the villagers worried how they would last until spring. Yet through it all, Elias kept tending to his flock, sharing his firewood with neighbors and giving away the little food he had whenever someone went hungry. He asked for nothing in return. It was simply his nature. As Christmas approached, the village prepared a modest celebration. A small tree stood in the center of the square, decorated with dried berries, pine cones, and ribbon scraps saved from years past. Candles flickered in the windows of every cottage, giving the night a soft golden glow. The people gathered and tried, despite the hardships, to lift their spirits. But worry still weighed heavily on their hearts. On the night before Christmas, a storm swept through the valley. Winds howled across the hills, shaking rooftops and bending trees. Snow fell so thick that even the moon struggled to shine through. And somewhere in the midst of that fierce storm, Elias heard a sound he had hoped never to hear, the cry of a lost sheep. He rose from his chair, wrapped himself in his heavy cloak, and opened the door. A blast of icy wind struck him, but he did not hesitate. Rowan barked at his side, anxious and alert. Elias stepped out into the night, lantern in hand, began the climb toward the hills where his flock had last settled. The storm stung his face, but he pressed forward. Visibility was poor, and the narrow mountain paths grew slippery under the weight of fresh snow. Every step was a struggle. Yet he knew one thing with perfect certainty. He would not leave any member of his flock behind. When a shepherd takes responsibility for even the smallest creature, that responsibility becomes a promise. And Elias never broke his promises. Hours passed, and still he climbed. The wind roared around him, swallowing his voice when he called out for the sheep. Rowan sniffed the ground, following faint traces left behind. At last, after nearly losing hope, Elias spotted a small shape huddled beside a fallen tree. A little lamb, trembling from the cold, bleated weakly as he approached. "There you are," Elias whispered, wrapping the lamb in his cloak. "I've got you now." But as he turned back toward the village, he realized the storm had worsened. The path he came from was buried, and the way home would be even more dangerous than his climb upward. Elias paused, considering what to do. Then he saw something faint in the distance, a soft light glowing through the storm like a beacon. It flickered gently, impossible to ignore. Something inside him knew he had to follow it. Through the snow and wind he walked, drawn to that shimmering light. Rowan stayed close, guiding him through drifts nearly waist-high. The lamb pressed against his chest for warmth. And then, as they crested the hilltop, Elias saw what the light truly was. A star, brighter than any star he had ever seen, hanging low in the sky as if reaching down to meet the earth. Its glow illuminated the entire valley, turning the snow into a field of diamonds. The air grew strangely warm, and the storm quieted around him. In that moment, Elias felt something he could not explain. Peace, assurance, as if someone were telling him without words that he was not alone in the storm. With the star guiding him, Elias found a safe path down the hill. The wind calmed, the snow softened, and when he reached the village, every lantern in the square began to glow brighter, reacting to the star above. Villagers opened their doors, astonished to see Elias returning unharmed with the lost lamb in his arms. They gathered around him, marveling at the brilliant star overhead. Children pointed in wonder, elders whispered prayers, and for the first time in many long weeks, the fear in their hearts lifted, like mist rising from the morning fields. The village elder approached Elias and said, "This is a sign, a blessing. Tonight we are watched over." The villagers shared food and warmth with one another, and though they had little, no one went without. The night glowed with hope. Laughter returned. Children played in the snow, and Elias, the quiet shepherd, simply stood with his dog and the rescued lamb, grateful for the light that had shown him the way. In the days that followed, something miraculous happened. Despite the harsh winter, the village's supplies lasted longer than expected. Storms softened. The flock grew strong. Travelers passing through the valley spoke of an unusually bright star seen only above that small village, guiding them safely through dangerous weather. News spread far and wide. But Elias said little of it. He cared only that his neighbors were safe and that his flock was whole again. Years passed, and the story of that Christmas Eve became a cherished legend of the village, the night when a shepherd's devotion, that a miracle of light. And every year, when winter returned and the candles were lit in cottage windows, the villagers remembered the lesson Elias had taught them, that kindness, courage, and love for even the smallest among us can bring warmth to the coldest night. Now, my dear friends, you might wonder what became of Elias. Well, I can tell you this. He lived the rest of his days as he always had, guiding his flock, helping his neighbors, and sharing whatever little he possessed. But every Christmas Eve, without fail, he would climb the hill with Rowan at his side, stand beneath the winter sky, and whisper a quiet thank you to the star that once guided him through a storm when hope seemed all but lost. And that brings us back to why I tell this story. Christmas is not just about gifts or celebration. It is about guidance, compassion, and the simple truth that even in our darkest winters, there is always a light waiting to lead us forward. Elias believed that light came from beyond the world, something holy and eternal. Others believed it came from his own heart, and perhaps, in a way, both were true. So when you find yourself facing worry, hardship, or loneliness, remember the shepherd. Remember that courage does not always roar. Sometimes it walks steadily through a storm with a lantern in hand. Remember that kindness is never wasted. And remember that the smallest act of care can spark a miracle you may never fully see. As I continue my journey tonight across snowy rooftops and quiet towns, I carry Elias's story with me like a lantern of my own. May its glow reach you wherever you are, and may this Christmas fill your heart with the same warmth that guided a humble shepherd home. Merry Christmas to you, and may your path always be guided by a light that never fades.